Today we're going to be looking at one of the coolest classes in Baldur's Gate 3, the Paladin. This class is a ton of fun both in playstyle, but also it has a really fun class fantasy. There are some crossover spells with the Cleric, but also there are Paladin-only spells, Oaths, which replenish on a short rest, and more. The Paladin relies on charisma for improving their spellcasting and strength for their melee damage. Paladins can use shields and heavy armor when it comes to armor proficiencies, and Paladins also have quite a few weapon proficiencies to choose from. Paladins have 4 choices when it comes to their oath. There's Oath of the Ancients, Oath of Devotion, and Oath of Vengeance. Now, depending on which one you choose, you'll get different subclass features, which in this case, a different standard of how you act to uphold your oath. Now, if you go against your oath, you can become an Oathbreaker, which is actually the 4th choice of subclass, which we'll get into in more detail later on. But it's actually something important to keep in mind. If you want to do a good or bad playthrough as a Paladin, your choice is going to affect how you can actually play Paladin. If you like the Oath of Devotion subclass, for example, but want to do a bad playthrough, it won't work because you'll end up breaking your oath, so keep that in mind. Alright, so the Oath of Vengeance is centered around fighting evil, doing the moral thing, dispensing retribution onto the wicked, and wiping the world of their corruption. Their oath bonus action is Inquisitor's Might, causing you or an ally's weapon to deal additional radiant damage and daze enemies for a turn. Radiant damage is very potent versus undead monsters, so if you plan on going a Paladin, you'll be well equipped to deal with ghouls, zombies, and other undead monstrosities. Your subclass spells are focused around crowd control with spells like Abjure Enemy, which can cause a creature to become frightened and immobilized. The Oath of Devotion is centered around courage, compassion, and duty to obey laws and defend those in need. The Oath charge bonus action is Holy Rebuke, granting an ally an aura that deals radiant damage to anyone who dares strike them with a melee attack. You also get Divine Health, which prevents disease from affecting you, as well as Turn the Unholy, which drives off all nearby undead, having them run away in fear. Sacred Weapon, which increases your weapon's damage, and more spells that generally provide defensive buffs and healing. And the third oath, which is Oath of the Ancients, is centered around acts of kindness, giving hope to those who have none, sheltering joy, and preserving love. The Oath charge bonus action is Healing Radiance. You heal yourself and all nearby allies for 5 hit points and another 5 the following turn. You also get druid spells like Speak with Animals, Nature's Wrath, Turn the Faithless, and Ensnaring Strike. And if you break your oath from any of these 3 oaths, you can become the 4th subclass for Paladin, which is the Oathbreaker. Now, this subclass is centered around a desire to take control of your own fate, to not be bound by any oath or directive on how to live. The Oathbreaker seeks to forge their own path, and by breaking their oath, the light fades from the Paladin, and in that darkness, new powers erupt. 3 oath charge bonus actions become available upon breaking your oath. Number 1, and my personal favorite, is Control Undead. This allows you to gain control over an undead creature, which will follow you around and attack your enemies as long as the undead is lower level than you. This lasts until a long rest. Now, unlike ranger companions or familiar summons, when I took control of a ghoul, it actually did not have a portrait, and it did not have any abilities that I could control, but it did in fact attack my enemies automatically when it was its turn to fight, and did follow me around obediently. The second oath charge is Spiteful Suffering. This deals necrotic damage each turn to an enemy, and attack rolls against said enemy have advantage. And then the last oath charge is my second favorite, which is Dreadful Aspect. This frightens all nearby enemies for 2 turns, which immobilizes them, which is awesome. Now, what I also love about Paladins is that they can fill multiple roles within your party. They can heal using their powerful Lay on Hands class action, which heals for a massive amount consistently. There is no range, just a flat amount, and actually will do more damage than a fighter thanks to Holy Smite. When a fighter gets to level 11, they're going to actually have 3 attacks per turn consistently, and whereas a Paladin's only going to have 2. And so around level 11, a fighter will start doing more damage than a Paladin, but until then, a Paladin can definitely deal more damage than a fighter if you're trying to compare the two. Not only that, they can also take a lot of punishment because they wear heavy armor, and they can empower their defenses and even, again, heal themselves, so they're actually really good in the front lines. And since their spellcasting is also improved by charisma, it actually makes sense for them to be your dialogue specialist, right? Charisma. Handling your charisma checks such as intimidation and persuasion, they can have really easy rolls, basically getting you through different conversations with ease. Now, with that in mind, I find giving them the soldier background is perfect because that's going to give them athletics and intimidation, which is, again, kind of fitting that role of, you know, having a melee fighter doing melee damage, but also being able to be a dialogue specialist. And then at level 2, paladins are given the option to choose their fighting style, and options include things like defense, which give you a +1 bonus to armor class when you're wearing armor. There's dueling. When you're wielding a melee weapon in one hand and no weapon in the other, you gain +2 damage, bonus damage to rolls with that weapon. And then there's great weapon fighting. When you roll a 1 or 2 damage die for an attack with a two-handed weapon, that die is re-rolled once. And then there's also protection. When you have a shield, impose disadvantage on an enemy who attacks one of your allies when you are within 1.5 meters of as a reaction. So reactions you can do when it's not your turn. And so if someone attacks your ally while you're sort of within range of them, you can actually give them disadvantage on that attack. This one sounds really, really cool. I actually really love the idea of a paladin just being sort of upfront, tank, heal. They're just utility, and they use a shield and can actually just take a lot of hits for your party. I think that's a great role to fill for them. And then they're also your dialogue specialist. So a lot of these different fighting styles are really, really cool. One thing to note though, if you kind of wanted to play a paladin that's also like a ranged attacker, that's sort of not going to work in Baldur's Gate 3. As you can see, of these different fighting styles, there's nothing that's like crossbow or bow or anything ranged. Really, paladins are focused on being powerful melee fighters. And so if you wanted to play a ranged class, I would say maybe not play paladin, because they're really focused more on spellcasting and melee fighting. But overall, the paladin class in Baldur's Gate 3 is actually what I'm playing right now. I've got about 50 hours going into the paladin, and it is incredibly fun, very powerful, can definitely compete in melee range very, very well. A lot of their reactions are very powerful, being able to attack multiple times, empower your attacks with smite, and then also there's just so much class flavor with the different subclasses, depending on what oath you want to take. Becoming an Oathbreaker I think is really cool. And then even if you become an Oathbreaker, you can still deal radiant damage, and that's something that I thought, coming from a game like World of Warcraft, I was like, okay, so if I become an Oathbreaker, I'm like becoming a Death Knight, right? And I'm just gonna only deal like necrotic damage, right? Well, actually you still retain a lot of your paladin abilities. It's just only about 4 to 6 subclass abilities are changing, and you actually still retain a lot of the class features. You can still bless your allies, you can still heal them, you can still buff them, you can still deal radiant damage, which is really iconic for paladins. And that radiant damage is actually very important to have when you're going up against undead. Radiant damage I feel like does very, very well against undead. And so even if you become an Oathbreaker paladin, you can still dispense of undead minions very, very well. And also as an Oathbreaker, you can take control of the undead too. So paladins are still very powerful against undead, even if they become an Oathbreaker, and maybe in some cases even more so, being able to take control of them every so often. And so I really find this class to be a lot of fun. It's kind of the Death Knight class of Baldur's Gate, in my opinion. It's definitely very like a Dark Knight if you wanted to go that Oathbreaker path, but also a very powerful melee character. It has more flavor than a fighter or a barbarian, if you ask me. So I found this class to be a lot of fun so far. Anyways, guys, if you liked the video, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe for more Baldur's Gate 3 videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.